You ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. Well, welcome back to another episode. In fact, this is the first episode of season two of Let's Talk with Rev. And today we've got a special guest with us. We not only have a former board member for the People's Justice Council as our guest, but we've got now a more recent candidate for the Public Service Commissioner for the state of Georgia, and that of Chandra Farley. But also, Chandra Farley is the CEO of Resolve, a consulting practice with a mission to increase the impact of energy, climate, and utility initiatives by centering equity. As well as she founded the Good Energy Project with a vision to connect the transformational power of Black women to the movement for equitable clean energy. There's a whole lot of other stuff that she's also involved in, but I'll also bring up the fact that she is a co-chair of the High Fund for Climate and Gender Justice, and she is excuse me, she is the Climate and Gender Justice co-chair for the High Fund, as well as the chair of the Georgia NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice Committee. I am grateful, grateful, grateful that I can call her all these things, but I also call her my sister. It is good to be with you, Chandra Farley.
It is good to be with you, brother, too. That is the most important title. But
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, we family.
that's
And
it.
being that we family, as I tell anybody, I ain't gonna act like I don't know you. So we just gonna
Exactly.
have some good old conversation. So Chandra, today we are talking about energy justice. We're talking about energy justice, and we really want to look at defining energy justice. What does energy justice mean, in particular for those in the South? But I think that reading the reports and listening at the discussions, this is an issue that is not just in the South, it is everywhere. And so let's talk to somebody who's very, very much involved in energy justice. And who better could I choose than my sister girlfriend, Chandra Farley, to talk to that subject. So let's talk about first and foremost energy burden, because before we can get to energy justice, we've got to deal with the ugliness of energy burden. So could you say more about energy burden?
Absolutely. So the definition of energy burden is around household income versus our bills. So the more the light bill is, the lower your income, the higher your energy burden. And that is the most basic way to describe it.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that I have to do is put those things in practical terms for people, and in doing that, I have to bring up some of the stories that I've heard. You know, of people really having to make decisions on what type of food they would eat, whether they could afford healthy food, because healthy food is much more expensive than that cheaper food and those fast food restaurants that we eat from. And they that not just them having to choose it for themselves, but their families as well. I've even heard of stories of elderly people, in particular elderly women, having to stretch out their medicine so that they'll be able to pay a utility bill in addition to trying to maintain their health. And it happens all too often here. And guess what? In the midst of this pandemic, we've got in the state of Alabama this fight over COVID relief money being spent for prison, to build prisons. When you've got people who are literally struggling in this manner, when it comes down to energy burdens. But let's go further at energy burdens and talk about how energy burdens actually lock us into poverty. Could you describe how you've seen that in your work and how that cycle happens in this conversation as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And the further we go, we also, the conditions that you mentioned, really talking about energy insecurity, right? And so when energy burden is like one metric of energy insecurity. And I like to reference Dr. Diana Hernandez, who does a lot of work around energy insecurity. She's based out of New York, and it's been a real inspiration for my work. And she talks about this trifecta of insecurity: food, housing, and energy. And so that's what we're really talking about, this interplay between the physical conditions of housing, the actual, how much it costs to actually pay the bills, and then those energy related coping strategies that you're talking about. Um, how long can I go without paying the light bill this month, so I can buy the school supplies? How long can I go without paying the light bill, so I've got enough money to put gas in the car to get to work, because the bus doesn't come by my house and I've got to take the kids to school. And if I don't have 3 hours to spend walking to the bus stop, transferring two buses to get to work that's 2 hours north of town, right? So it's this interplay between all of these things, and particularly keeps Black people and poor people locked in this cycle of poverty, just bill to bill, paycheck to paycheck. And again, I think we also have to talk about, when we really talk about, back to this physical condition of housing, because that is so much also of what the energy burden is about. The poor housing infrastructure, and the way we can relate that poor housing infrastructure to racist federal policy like redlining that
Yeah.
made sure the Black communities and the poor communities were disconnected from investment, disconnected to transit investment, and whose housing values were depressed. So when you go to talk about, oh well, let's pay money to weatherize our homes, let's pay money to, have these, make these energy efficiency upgrades, which we know can save people 20 to 30% on their bills every month, just by having a healthier home as well, right? Because when we make these conditions, we're talking about energy, but we're also talking about health,
Yeah.
molds, indoor air quality, all these things that keep us sick in this cycle. We're already overburdened by asthma because we're located next to the interstates and these huge traffic interchanges and power plants. So it all works together. So when we're talking about energy justice, we're also talking about racial justice,
Yeah.
and economic justice.
Yeah. But now when we get into it and we start looking at this whole cycle, and something you just brought up was the history of redlining, and then you talked about the housing stock, and looking at these older houses. Now, looking at the programs that the government has set up, many of these programs are for those who own homes. We know that as Black Americans in particular, we've lost 90% of our land wealth. So we aren't the owners of these homes; we are the renters. What do we say about furthering our advocacy for energy justice to include those who are renters that are, being punished for being renters?
Absolutely. And I mean, the key word is expand, right? I mean, that's a huge issue. When we, let's take it, city of Atlanta, for example, and the way that Georgia Tech, Greenlink Analytics were able to use data to identify, out of 27 Atlanta zip codes, there were 6 that experienced energy burdens almost 3 times higher than whiter, wealthier zip codes north of the city. And these are also the zip codes right next to the interstates. You know, these are the zip codes with low rates of insurance. These are also the zip codes that have about 60% of renters when you look at the energy burden. So those who are energy burdened, about 60% of that population are renters. So then we have to start having the conversation, you know, utility experts, utility program experts will talk about split incentives, right? So landlords don't see the benefit of making upgrades because they don't live there and it costs them money and they don't see how they can recoup those dollars. And then the folks living in the homes, they're renters and they might need to be moving in 3 months and don't have the disposable income to make those upgrades, or don't have even the runway to get in the queue for programs that might be able to offer them assistance to make those upgrades. So when we're talking about renters, we really have to dig into this split incentive issue. Um, and and when we're talking about landlords, we're not really talking about so much large apartment companies, you know, like a Post or an Amley or a Gables, who have very strong sustainability programs, you know, who
Mhm.
are using things like new market tax credits to build to lead standards or certain energy efficiency standards. We're talking about folks like my mama and daddy, my grandparents, who owned, you know, 6 or 7 properties and rented them out to the people in our church or the women who worked in our restaurant, and, you know, wanted to build like safe, secure, healthy housing. But when you start talking about, so we're talking about like those folks, people who invest in a few properties as a way to create some generational wealth, as a way to create, you know, some additional income, but still don't have the equity perhaps in certain properties because of where they're located. Again, back to redlining, because the property values are depressed. So how are we working like with that segment of the population to do education? We have to keep educating.
Yeah.
Education, education, educate. Why does this matter? Why should I care about this? First of all, and then we have to match up the education with the pathway to action, and the programs and partnerships that can give those, provide them access to those dollars to make those upgrades. So we are taking care of each other, right? And we are, that's a, it's a practice of community wealth building,
Right.
because we know when we make these improvements, we've got healthier homes, we've got stronger, more secure homes, and that increases their value, right? Well, and then once you get to that point, you've got to make sure that the landlords see the value in providing safe and sustainable as in timeline housing for people, and would be willing to, or have the government incentives or city support to make sure that they don't then feel like they've got to boot this family out of their homes so they can, you know, because now they can garner this higher rent.
Mhm.
And that's just all about important public-private philanthropic partnership. How are we leveraging federal incentives around the dollars? Like, let's provide safe, secure, and sustainable housing, not prisons.
Yeah.
Because if we're providing safe, secure, and sustainable housing, we don't need as many prisons, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, this is not to get into this, but I say they build prisons because they don't want to deal with poverty. As I mean, and this is the same thing. It's just another way of passing the buck, so to speak, when it comes down to dealing with the poverty. And the reality is, when we talk about energy burdens, I want the people to realize that this is happening to our most vulnerable communities. This isn't happening to uh, those people living in more affluent places. This is happening to people who already can't afford to really make it in the first place. But at the same time, I want to say that it's just not happening to them. It's happening to us all to a greater extent. our utilities take advantage of us, and it's designed. And it's high time that we put the spotlight on it, and really understand the reality and the severity of where they have us positioned in society, and we need to flip the script on that. We really need to flip the script on that, because this it's been too silent and too violent for too long.
Absolutely. It's another layer of wealth extraction, right? From our communities. We're stuck in
Yeah.
this cycle of poverty. We don't have access to the pathways to move us out at all levels, right? Housing, food, energy, transportation, all of these things are compounding. We used to say this a lot at Partnership for Southern Equity, and we talked about it in the Just Energy Academy. People aren't worried about the rent on Monday, worried about gas on Tuesday, worried about the grocery bill on Wednesday. Those things are happening all the time, constantly compounding, and you're just kind of like running, what can I do today? What can I do
Yeah.
today to make it another day, versus having the disposable income, but also the will, right? Like the will to be able to see 2 to 3 years down the road instead of just 1 week down the road, right?
Yeah.
And when we talk about these opportunities, even when we normalize for income, and people ask me what I mean by normalize, and this is some language I got from the engineers I used to work with, basically like you're even it out, right? And so when we're talking about, we can talk about households qualified as low income and their access to weatherization and energy efficiency, let alone solar. But even when we look at income for Black households, Latino, Latinx households, the rate of adoption for solar is still like 30, 40, if not 50% less than that of white households, like with the same income. And so, what is that about, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
can't be what you can't see, right?
Yeah.
Solar is hard enough. It's up on people's roof, it's out in some fields, in rural Georgia. And, it just may not be what you're paying attention to. And it's and that is a wealth creation strategy, not just value for your home. Let's talk about resilience. Like, let's look at what happened in Texas last year. Look what's happened with the hurricanes in the last few years down the coast. There were stories of people who were able to use their batteries, if they had them related to their solar on their home,
Mm.
for electricity when they didn't have any, because they didn't have to worry about the accessing the grid because they had it stored, right? There were stories of people who are able to use their electric vehicles for different ways to keep things charged. So, we've got the income disparities when we talk about economic justice, but then when we talk about racial justice, we can still talk about these disparities independent of levels of income.
Well, that's again, you're looking at the fact that these two tie in together. You're looking at the disparities, and you're looking at what, better yet, you're looking at who it is that is being affected by this. Again, this is our poor uh, society that is being affected by this. And for me as a faith leader, for me as a person of conscience, how can I sit idly by, knowing that there are people out here who are suffering, who could hardly make it anyway, and yet and still they are being regulated to make it even worse on them. They already have everybody digging in their pockets just to survive. And then on top of this, in order for them to flip lights on and stay warm, they have to be that much more impoverished. There's something shameful about our society that can see that and look away.
It's expensive to be poor,
It is
right?
absolutely I mean, it's the criminalization of poverty
Yep.
is what it is. And unfortunately, being a renter is categorized in that impoverished role, and so you're being punished for being a renter as well, and you don't have access to the same programs that some of the homeowners. But even in that though, those who own homes are still not having the same level of entry or points of entry to some of these programs. So we look at Ali, and the reason why it's slow moving and not a whole lot of people have access to it is because of the barriers of entry, the application itself, the process itself. They've made it almost impossible for the normal person to take advantage of.
All the time. It's, it's like you take a step and it's another brick wall, right? Particularly on the home ownership piece, when we talked about those disparities in the adoption rates of solar. Um, Most people aren't paying attention. Well, we can't say most people because we know a lot of people are, because particularly when we talk about, energy burden, and 1/3 of our population every single month having to forego another necessity to keep the lights on,
Yeah,
right? So it's a lot of folks.
yeah,
But sometimes people's only interaction with energy is the bill. You can pay it, and God bless you, you are secure enough to have it on auto pay, and you know that you're going to have enough money to at least cover that bill, and you might see it pop up in your bank statement, but you aren't really logging into your utility bill website and like looking at your energy tracking and all of these things where tools might be available. So you've got
right,
that group of people who really aren't thinking about um, energy per se, but just not having to worry about the bill. And then you've got people who are worried about the bill,
right,
like how we're going to pay,
right.
and that really impacts energy efficiency and solar adoption as well, because it's kind of like, well, why, but to the homeowner's point, again, we go back to racist federal policy like redlining, environmental racism that has depressed our property values. So let's say you do own your home and you're a senior or something like that. Well, the financing, the paperwork, the credit rate, all of those things are still, and then the utilities, right, who are doing things like Alabama charging people, and Georgia charging people to
For
even
having solar.
monthly on their bill, when we know that the whole point of having solar is to reduce your bill. So they're charging you 11, 13 cents per kilowatt hour, but they're
Yep,
only going to give you 2 or 3 if you've
yep,
got solar on your home, right? So, then we get into this whole like net metering conversation and the kinds of things that utilities are doing to continue to depress opportunities related to energy justice.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Utilities, yeah, yeah, I can cut it out. Utilitization.
Wild, it's wild out here.
Uh,
They have these
uh,
monopolies. They control everything,
but
right?
not but we look at they don't just control utilities, they control everything.
Everything. I'll never
Everything.
forget being on a call about this was with Race Forward, and they were working with a few cities around 100% clean energy commitments and transitions, and it was Atlanta, DC, and Portland. And we were having a conversation about Atlanta, and one of them said, because we had just developed a clean energy advisory board for the city of Atlanta to have community, neighborhood, resident input related to how that plan was going to be implemented to make sure it's equitable.
Mm.
And, you have certain people you have to have on there. Georgia Power's on there. They are the utility person. We will fight against them in the courts or demonstrate, but they also are who we have to talk to about energy programs. All we have to like work with it. There's no way around it, right?
Yeah.
And so they're on the board, and one of our advisors from Race Forward, she was like, so what is it like to sit there with Georgia Power, like the people that control the energy system? And I had just it hit me because I had just never thought of it that way, even though it. And me and another person from the city, we kind of like, well, damn, yeah, you know what? They control it. Because when we talk about the energy system, we're not just talking about the electricity that comes into it.
Right.
Transmission lines, the
Right.
distribution, the community programs. They are grooming people. I was just on a call talking about this. They've got the Earth Care programs for the elementary and high school students. They've got the STEM programs for, folks in college. They are the community leaders who are donating to the Kiwanis Club,
Yeah.
donating to the NAACP, which we've seen reports about, and people are like, these are our family members. They got the good job at the utility, they got
Our
the good stuff,
NAACP here gave them some kind of award or something, some type of achievement award or something.
And it's just it's we just have to go a layer deeper and think about these things. And it's about accountability, right? And we can't get to accountability until we understand why we are even having this conversation. I know it's the same with you. I still have conversations about, people. I didn't know about the Public Service Commission until I started doing this work, over a decade ago. Like, why would I? Right. First of all, in Georgia, it's called the Public Service Commission. What the hell is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
At least in other states, it's called the Public Utility Commission, and then, on the other piece, let alone it's elected, right?
Yep.
And so we just, this apathy, but also just exhaustion. We are asked to do so much. And it's like, can I get a break?
Well, I think this fight is one of those intangible fights. In essence, you don't see your utilities. You see the bill, yes, but you kind of quickly acclimate to that because you got to keep the lights on. You've got to keep your heat and cool air, and you've got to, so you just,
well, it's like water.
You make concessions, right?
Yeah, you don't know. It's like infrastructure,
right?
Period.
Right.
We don't think about it until we hit a pothole.
Exactly.
We don't think about it until the power line is down or we hear a transformer blow in our neighborhood. As long as it's working, we are beholden to it, in such a way.
It gets to be, it's like, okay, that's just part of life, and that's how we view it, and I don't know that we know we can change it,
and don't know why, right? Why, we're just having this conversation, and something, I think a conversation we really need to have with each other also about the light bill. How many conversations do you remember or still hear about, well, such and such can't pay their light bill, or such and such needs some money to, pay their light bill, because if you can't pay your bill, you are doing something wrong, versus even being able to understand, first of all, it's expensive to be poor. And two, why does somebody have a $300-400 light bill?
Right.
That's
right.
not normal. And so we don't talk to each other about it because there's a level of shame around, how did I let the bill get this high? Why is my bill, I can't keep up with it. I'm always got to, ask for help paying it. So then it becomes this thing that's like our fault, and a level of shame around like not being able to pay, where we can't even get to the question of, why is my bill always so high? Like,
Right.
why? Who
Right.
can, who can do something, who can I talk to about why the bill is so high? It's got to be another question, not just about, damn, I can't pay my bill again, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. But this leads us into this last part though, because you and I both advocate for this. I consider myself an advocate. You are an activist. Uh, how do we address this? How do we fight for energy justice?
You say this, Rev, you got to get in there. You just got to get in there. It touches everybody's got to find their justice home, right? And wherever that may be, it could be food, it could be housing, but it is all connected. First of all, we just have to remember it's all connected. But for utilities specifically, start asking questions. Call your commissioners. I say to people in Georgia, I'm like, there are 5 people, and they work at 244 Washington Street downtown. It's a little different now during COVID. You can call them, you can go up there, you can meet with them, and you should be asking questions as to why your bill is so high. You can ask them why you can't access solar. You should ask them why you can't access the energy efficiency program that and one of my favorite quotes used to be, it must be anonymous or something. It's like, make trouble, ask questions. You start asking questions,
You making
you're going
trouble.
to start asking more questions, and there's a lot of times there's not going to be an answer. But at least, we're asking the questions. So, and talk to each other in asking these questions. As an advocate and, an activist doing, doing this kind of work, everything that we do, every advancement that we want to make, there is one barrier or door, maybe as we do more transformation, but right now there's one barrier that you are always going to bump into, and that is your Public Utility Commission or Public Service Commission. There is no path to environmental justice, utility justice, energy justice, racial justice without going through those commissions. And so, whether it's making public comment, whether it's calling your commissioner, calling your utility commission, running for your electric membership cooperative board, um, I have decided to run for Georgia Public Service Commission.
There it is. That's what I was waiting on right there. There it is. Finally pulled it out.
I was getting there. But it's time to take that advocacy to the inside, right? The decisions that the Public Service Commission makes every single day, right? This is one of the most important offices that people have never heard of. It's very obscure, it's got this obscure name. But the decisions that the commission is making every single day have immediate impact on our pocketbooks and wallets, right? Our homes, our health, our income are all impacted by these decisions. And there has traditionally been no voice for that interest on these commissions. They see regulating the utility as writing blank check to the utility, doing whatever the utility dictates to them. And so it's time for a different way for those decisions, to have a different voice. But then also within the commission structure itself, right? Our commission is set up. We have 5 elected commissioners in Georgia, but there's also a staff of like 80 that support them with all the research and the data, that they get to make these decisions. And a lot of times they don't, I won't say they don't value that information, but they don't always go the way, or take that information from the commission staff and use that to make the decisions. Very often they're making political decisions,
Right.
in direct contrast to the advice that they're getting based on the data. And so, but also within the commission staff, where is the director of environmental justice? Where is the director of income qualified programs? Like, where are the staff people who are specifically also focused on these issues? So when they see the integrated resource plan come through and there's no additional investment in energy efficiency, to say this is a primary pathway to energy justice and utility justice. Why, how can we push the utility to make more investment in this? And the commission has the power to do this, right? Georgia is now a top 10 state for solar because of decisions that the commission made to push them to do that. However, it's all utility scale. About 94% of the solar in Georgia is utility scale, which means the utilities are selling it, selling it to themselves, or, kind of keeping it within that, and it's having no material impact. Yes, it is important for greenhouse gas emission reduction.
Right.
It is important to support tax base of our rural communities. And yes, for some job creation, but because it's utility scale, these are short-term jobs, right?
Yep.
Why are you blocking the market to rooftop solar that we know can reduce bills, that we know creates long-term homegrown jobs and builds community wealth, right?
Because they can't control it.
Exactly, right? Exactly.
And they trying to stall till they can control it. And it's the same, even with rooftop solar. For me, don't come to me trying to get me to buy into rooftop solar if you aren't going to package that with weatherization.
Right.
If you aren't going to seal up these people's homes, don't try to put solar on top of their homes, because all you're doing is just replacing a dirty, corrupt system for a clean, corrupt system.
Right, right.
We need a systems change
for everybody. Yeah.
Right. We need a systems change. Solar is needed for everybody.
Right.
I mean, you can do community solar, but everybody needs weatherization. Everybody's envelope on their home needs to be sealed in order for us to really make a dent in helping households. Like, you might be able to help the planet, as you said, bringing greenhouse gases down. And yes, definitely, we want to continue to maintain and take care of our home. If our home get upset enough to pull us off of it, so because it ain't going nowhere, we will, but it won't. And so yes, we need that, and that's great. But if we're going to talk about helping households, then you need to start with what's going to help that household,
right?
And then go from there,
right?
So yeah, I'm with you, but I really believe the stall that you see happening is just so that they can position themselves to stay in control of that market,
right?
So that the system of oppression and that system of extraction and perverseness, if you will, continues.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there is a new way, and there is a new day.
And you gonna help us to get there,
people to usher in,
Commissioner.
Usher in that day, and also remembering that hopefully I am one of, we've got to run somebody every 2 years, right? Because just me 5 to 1 isn't going to get it done, right? We need a 3-2 majority, on the commission. So how do we keep moving with all of these commissions? And we're always in a political cycle now, but our entire existence and ability to survive is political, right? I mean, we have to, whether that is our own politics, within community, or like the broader actual political system. We can try to ignore it, if we want, but we got to get in there. We've got to get in there, and I'm going right in all the way.
Well, listen, I got your back, and I'm gonna be right there fighting with you as much as I can. Now, as the People's Justice Council, we know we can't be partisan, so we can't get involved politically. But as Reverend Michael Malcolm, I'm all the way right there with my bullhorn saying, vote for her. And everybody in Atlanta that knows me and consider themselves friend, family, or foe, go and do what you got to do and press that button when it comes down to my sister girlfriend, Chandra Farley. Yeah, we need her. We need her because we know that she fights for us. Uh, Chandra,
Chandra from
thank you.
Georgia.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you, Rab.
being
This
with
was
us.
great.
Thank you for your time. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you for the information that you gave. But even more than that, thank you for sharing your passion with us and your love for justice and in particular energy justice. Listen, today as always, I offer to you love, peace, and light.